The last photo was taken at 6:17 p.m. A dinner table set for 8. China plates, folded cloth napkins, crystal glasses half full of sweet tea. A roast chicken, untouched, still steaming. Carrots glazed with honey. A green bean casserole. A peach pie in the center, uncut. The chairs were empty, all of them. The lights were still on. The front door was locked from the inside. The police found no fingerprints beyond those of the Whitmore family, no broken glass, no signs of forced entry. No neighbors reported anything out of the ordinary, except for one thing, a porch light that blinked for hours the night of October 12, 1971. The Whitmores vanished during dinner, and no one ever saw them again. 52 years later, the house still stood at the corner of 9th and Lincoln Street in Eugene, Oregon, weather-beaten, forgotten, but untouched. Neighbors called it the Frozen House. Others whispered about the dinner ghosts. Kids dared each other to knock on the door on Halloween, but no one ever crossed the gate. Inside, everything remained the same. The plates, the roast chicken, the peach pie, now fossilized, sealed under a custom-built glass case like a macabre museum display. The City Council voted to preserve it in 1993 as a historic curiosity, but few visited, fewer spoke about it. The silence around the Whitmore disappearance was almost as chilling as the case itself. Clare Whitmore hadn't returned to Eugene in over 20 years. Not since the funeral of her grandfather, the only Whitmore not at that dinner table. Now, 34 years old, she stood on the cracked sidewalk outside the house, suitcase in hand, the autumn wind teasing the hem of her coat. Golden leaves twirled around her boots like small dancers, unaware of the weight in her chest. She looked up at the house where her aunt, uncle, cousins, and grandmother had disappeared, and behind the window for just a second, she swore she saw something. Clare unlocked the rusted front gate with a skeleton key. The city had mailed it after her father passed away last month. Along with it came a letter with a legal stamp. As the last living heir of the Whitmore estate, the property is now yours. She didn't want it, but she didn't have a choice. Not after what they found in her father's garage, a dusty storage trunk labeled 1971, Do Not Open. Inside, 8 Super 8 film reels, 1 camera, and a note that simply read, They never left. Find the light. She hadn't slept since. The smell hit her first, not of death, but of time. Dust, wood, old fabric, something metallic. The kind of scent that only comes when a place has been sealed long enough to forget its own name. Clare coughed, pulling her coat tighter. The door creaked behind her. Her eyes adjusted to the dim yellow light as she stepped inside. The dining room was just as she remembered it from childhood photographs. The same velvet curtains, the same floral wallpaper peeling in the corners, and the table, unchanged. 8 chairs, each one tucked in gently, perfectly aligned. A fork clinked lightly against as if nudged by the air. Clare froze, then looked down. There was dust everywhere, except for one spot, one chair, the head of the table. There, the dust had been recently disturbed. She reached for her phone, turning on the flashlight. Her fingers trembled. Something was carved into the wood of the table, very faint, as if scratched in with a fingernail. Look behind the light. She stared at the words. Not fresh, old, but not from 1971. The wood had aged unevenly. Clare leaned in, heart racing. She felt the back of her neck prickle. She walked toward the antique chandelier hanging above the table. Reaching up, she noticed one of the bulbs was loose. She unscrewed it gently. A small piece of folded paper fell into her hand. Her breath caught. It wasn't paper. It was film. 35 millimeters rolled tightly, and on the edge, in tiny typewritten letters, OCT-12, dinner. Camera. Zu dus. Clare's knees almost buckled. There had only ever been one known camera in the house, one belonging to her uncle, who recorded family videos every Sunday. But now, a second camera. Her fingers tingled as she placed the film in her pocket. She turned on the hallway light and stepped toward the back of the house. The shadow stretched long across the faded carpet. She hadn't even noticed that the music had started. A piano, a soft, slow tune, played poorly, as if by a child. Clare turned toward the source, the parlor, but there was no piano there. Only an old sideboard, a broken mirror, and a dusty dollhouse. The music stopped. She waited. Held her breath. Nothing, just the quiet creaking of the house settling into itself, until a click, the unmistakable mechanical whir of a film reel spinning. Clare whipped around. The sideboard drawer was open, and inside, the camera, still humming, still warm. She hadn't touched it. She stared at it, her heartbeat pounding in her ears. Then the camera beeped, and the words on the tiny digital screen flickered to life. Playback, dinner, OCT 12, 1971. Clare backed away. No, she whispered, but her hand reached forward anyway, as if moved by something older than logic, something embedded in her blood. She pressed play. The screen lit up, flickering images. The Whitmore family sitting at the dinner table, laughing, talking. Someone raises a glass, and then a knock at the door. Every head turns. The image zooms in on her aunt. Her smile falters. She whispers something inaudible. Her hand trembles slightly as she reaches for a knife. The footage skips. And then, darkness. Clare's breath hitched. The camera froze on a single frame, a close-up. Her grandmother's face, eyes wide with something between recognition and terror. A shadow loomed behind her. A man, face obscured, but the lapel of his jacket had a patch. Faint, almost missed. A small badge, Eugene Police Department. Clare dropped the camera. It hit the floor with a dull thud and kept spinning, real sputtering, until the sound melted into static. She stood frozen. A knock echoed from the front door. 1, 2, 3. She wasn't expecting anyone. Clare Whitmore wasn't supposed to come back. She had built her life far from Eugene, Oregon. In Seattle, she curated antique artifacts at a private historical museum, gave quiet lectures to even quieter rooms, and avoided questions about her last name whenever they came. Everyone in the Pacific Northwest knew about the Whitmore family. They were the unsolved mystery whispered about in late-night coffee shops. The case that police cadets studied in training, the episode that crime podcasts love to retell every October. A family of 7 vanishes during dinner. No witnesses, no evidence, no bodies, just silence. Clare had spent her entire childhood learning how to live beneath the shadow of something she couldn't remember. She was 2 years old when it happened. She had been sick that night, staying at her grandfather's house on the other side of town. That one accident of timing saved her life. But it condemned her to questions that never had answers. Why weren't you there? Do you remember anything? Did your family have enemies? Are you scared someone might come back for you? Questions, even more than the dreams. The dreams always started the same way. A table set for dinner, laughter, a peach pie in the center. Then silence. The lights dimmed, the door creaked open, and a voice, always the same voice, whispering, "No." Then she'd wake up, covered in sweat, mouth dry, heart racing. For years, therapists called it survivor's guilt. But Clare had always believed something had been left unfinished. A presence, a feeling, a thread never cut. Now that thread had tugged her all the way back to Eugene. After finding the film in her father's trunk, Clare had called the police. They showed little interest. "Unless there's a body on the tape, Miss Whitmore, there's not much we can do." She had taken it to a private lab. The technician, an old man named Paul with shaking hands and nicotine-stained fingers, took one look at the reel and said, "Where did you find this?" "It's dated October 12, 1971. "You're sure?" "It says, Camera 2. My uncle had a Super 8, but this isn't his. This film wasn't processed. It was hidden. And that handwriting, it's police issue. I've seen hundreds of logs like that. Paul digitized the footage, frame by frame, working in silence for 6 hours. He didn't ask for money. When she returned, he simply handed her a flash drive and said, "Be careful who you show this." Why? Because someone already tried to bury it once. They might try again. Back at the Whitmore house, Clare settled into her childhood bedroom. Dust coated everything except the windowsill. There she found a small toy duck, yellow plastic, cracked. She had named it Mr. Howard. She picked it up. It was heavier than she remembered. Inside, wrapped in wax key, no note, no label, but she knew where it belonged. Downstairs in her late uncle's study was a locked drawer that had remained sealed since 1971. Her father had tried to force it open once, years ago, but the lock never gave. Clare inserted the brass key. It clicked instantly. Inside, a faded notebook. The pages were warped, the ink smeared. But on the first page, written in bold capital letters, "If something happens to us, do not trust Grady. Not even him." Her blood went cold. Grady. Harold Grady, the sheriff of Eugene in 1971. The man who led the investigation. The man who declared the house uncompromised. The man whose daughter, Evelyn Grady, was now the city's mayor. Clare snapped photos of every page, then carefully placed the notebook in a sealed bag. Her breath trembled as she picked up her phone. She debated calling the police. She debated calling the media. Instead, she called a name from her past, Rachel Hensley. Rachel had been a local reporter in the 90s. She'd investigated the Whitmore case obsessively and nearly lost her career because of it. She'd once claimed that evidence had been destroyed by local law enforcement, but no one listened. Clare hadn't spoken to her since she was 13. Now, 52, Rachel sounded surprised and cautious. "Clare, after all these years, why now?" "Because I found something." "You mean something real?" "A film and a notebook, my uncle's, and I think it was someone from the department." "Where are you?" "The house." "Jesus, don't move, I'm coming." Rachel arrived in 20 minutes. She looked different, thinner, her hair gray, but her eyes still burned with the same fire Clare remembered. They sat at the kitchen table. The same table. Clare showed her the flash drive and the photos of the notebook. Rachel didn't blink. She read every page twice. "Grady's daughter is running for re-election in 2 weeks." "You think it's connected?" "I think people do crazy things to protect family names." Clare hesitated. "What if this puts us in danger?" "Then we're closer than anyone's ever been." Outside, a car slowed down in front of the house. Rachel stood and peered through the curtain. "Do you know that car?" "No." "It's the third time it's passed in 10 minutes." Clare's chest tightened. Rachel snapped a photo of the license plate. "I've got a guy, ex-cop, quiet. He owes me a favor." "What do we do now?" "We dig." That night, Clare couldn't sleep. The dreams returned, but different. This time, she was standing at the dinner table. Everyone was frozen. Her uncle mid-laugh. Her aunt reaching for salt, her cousin smiling, and someone at the door, knocking. Clare walked toward it. Her fingers reached for the handle. And from behind, a whisper, "Don't open it. You're not ready." She woke up gasping. The house was silent, except for one sound, a soft mechanical click coming from the dining room. Clare stepped out of bed. Barefoot, careful. The house creaked under her weight. She turned the corner and saw the camera, back on the table, facing her, recording. Clare didn't sleep the rest of the night. She sat on the floor across from the camera, afraid to touch it again, afraid not to. It blinked slowly, red, steady, silent. She reached forward and pressed the button to stop recording. Nothing happened. She pressed it again. The blinking continued. Then the reel made a sound, a whir, a click, and it stopped. Her hands trembled as she picked it up. She removed the tape inside and held it up to the light. It was still warm. She labeled it with shaking hands. OCT 13, midnight, unexplained, and she locked it in her suitcase. Rachel came back the next morning with 2 cups of gas station coffee and a folded sheet of printer paper. Got that license plate traced, registered to a company called Cascade Security. Sounds official, right? It's not? Doesn't exist. Claire took a long sip. The coffee was cold. She didn't care. What now? We poked the hive, quietly. Rachel had a contact inside the county records office, a retired court clerk named Lydia, who still had access to archive boxes no one bothered to digitize. She agreed to meet them in an hour. Before leaving, Claire grabbed the toy duck again, the one with the brass key. She held it for a moment in her palm, then wrapped it in a napkin and slid it into her coat pocket, just in case. At the records office, Lydia met them in the basement. A woman in her 70s, she wore oversized glasses, orthopedic shoes, and a badge with peeling lamination. "I shouldn't be doing this," she whispered, "but I remember the Whitmore case. Everyone does." She brought out 2 boxes, one labeled Whitmore, Investigation 1971, the other with no label at all. This second box showed up 3 days after the first one was sealed. No chain of custody, no intake form. Sheriff Grady said it was duplicate material and had it archived separately. No one's touched it since. Rachel opened it. Inside were Polaroids, dozens of them. Claire reached in and pulled one out. Her throat went dry. It was her cousin, Jamie, sitting on the front porch. Date stamped OCT 12, 1971, 3:02 p.m. Behind him, just barely visible in the reflection of the window pane, was a man's silhouette, wearing a uniform, with a badge, and in the corner of the photo, handwritten in red ink, "Not an accident." They looked through the rest of the box, notes, photos, a broken wristwatch, a child's drawing, but something stood out, a sealed envelope, inside, on the label, Interview for Evelyn G. Rachel's eyes went wide. That's Evelyn Grady. She was 16 at the time, sheriff's daughter. They never said she was interviewed, Claire said. They didn't. They drove back to the house. Claire dug out her old cassette player from the attic, miraculously still working after all these years. They inserted the tape. The audio clicked. A man's voice, measured, rehearsed. Interview with Evelyn Grady, October 14, 1971. 2 days after the incident, present, Sheriff Harold Grady, Deputy Marcus Heller. Then Evelyn's voice, younger, nervous. "I didn't mean to see it. I was just walking home." "See what?" "The light?" "In the basement window. It wasn't like normal light. It flickered. I thought maybe the power was out." "What time was this?" "Maybe 7:30? I wasn't wearing a watch." "Did you knock on the door?" "No." "I was scared. It looked like someone was pulling something across the floor." A pause. "Dragging?" "I don't know. Maybe." "Did you tell anyone else?" "No. You told me not to." Click. The tape ended. Rachel stared at the player. They buried this. She saw it, and she never said a word after that. Claire looked up. "You think Evelyn knows what happened?" Rachel didn't answer. Instead, she walked to the bookshelf and pulled out the family photo album Claire had retrieved earlier that week. They flipped to a page marked October 1971, the last photo taken. 7 chairs filled and one person behind the camera, unseen. Claire leaned in, on the glass of the china cabinet behind the table. A reflection, a hand, holding something, not a camera, a badge. Later that night, Rachel went home to scan the Polaroids. Claire stayed alone in the house. Around midnight, the porch light began blinking. Claire stepped outside. There was no wind, no sound. Just the light, on, off, every 2 seconds. She flipped the switch inside. It stayed on. She returned to the porch. The blinking continued. She looked closer. The bulb itself was fine, but beneath the fixture, wedged into the wooden frame, was a slip of paper. She pulled it out. It was a receipt from a hardware store. Dated October 13th, 1971. Purchased item, light timer name, M. Heller Marcus Heller, deputy, present during the interview with Evelyn. Claire stared at the receipt, her breath catching. What were they timing? Why install it the day after the disappearance? She snapped a photo and sent it to Rachel. Rachel replied instantly, "He died in '92, but he had a cabin in Florence. I've got the address. I'll meet you tomorrow." But Claire didn't sleep. Again. This time she couldn't. Something pulled her toward the basement, the one no one had ever opened. The one sealed by police tape, half a century old. She grabbed the old notebook again, flipped to the final page, scrawled, messy, almost illegible. "It's under the furnace. If you're reading this, don't go alone." She found a flashlight and a crowbar. The basement door groaned as it opened. Dust clouded the air. The light flickered. Each step creaked. The temperature dropped. The furnace sat against the far wall, rusted, massive, cold. She kneeled beside it. She remembered her grandfather saying they replaced the heater in 1970. Why would it be back? She tapped the side. It echoed strangely, hollow. She pried off the metal panel. Inside, a hollow compartment, and within it, a small metal box. She opened it. Inside, a ring of keys, a folded map, and a reel of undeveloped film, and a badge. Sheriff's badge, thought too. Sheriff Harold Grady. Before she could react, a loud creak sounded above her. Someone was in the house. Claire froze. Footsteps moved slowly across the floor. She turned off her flashlight, sat in silence. The steps reached the top of the basement stairs, then stopped. And a soft knock. 1, 2, 3. Claire held her breath. The footsteps on the floorboards above her didn't move. The silence stretched long and thin, like a wire pulled tight. Then the steps turned, slowly, and the front door opened, closed. Claire exhaled in bursts, her pulse pounding against her throat. She stayed still for 5 minutes before emerging from the basement, clutching the metal box and its contents like something sacred. She didn't sleep that night. At sunrise, Rachel arrived with 2 coffees and a voice hoarse from anxiety. Claire showed her everything, the keys, the map, the badge. Rachel stared at the badge for a long time. "This was supposed to be buried with him," she said. "There was a ceremony, I remember. The city honored him. This badge shouldn't exist." Claire nodded. "He knew. He did something. And whatever it was, it's tied to that reel, to what's on it." Rachel opened the folded map. It showed a back road through the woods outside Eugene, marked in red ink, Florence Cabin, Heller. "I was going to tell you," Rachel said. "He had a place near the dunes. Nobody went there. He died alone. Let's go." The road was narrow, lined with moss and whispering pine. By the time they reached the cabin, it was nearly noon. The place was falling apart. Rotting wood, shattered windows, ivy strangling the walls, but the door was intact. Claire tried the key. It turned. Inside, the air was heavy, like something had died and been waiting. Rachel turned on her phone flashlight. The walls were covered in newspaper clippings, all about the Whitmores. One in the center was underlined with red ink. "Sheriff Grady confirms no foul play and disappearance." Next to it, a photo of the family, and beneath it, written in marker, "Liar." Claire moved deeper inside. She found a file box labeled Whitmore, Staging. Inside, Polaroids, floor plans, a handwritten checklist. Remove secondary entry point secure recording equipment, lock from inside, loop light circuit, remove bodies, clean surfaces, burn documentation. At the bottom, check attic last. Claire felt like vomiting. "They planned this," she said. "They staged the disappearance." Rachel grabbed a folder marked for her and opened it. inside was a letter. Claire, if you're reading this, then you found what I never had the courage to say out loud. Your family didn't disappear. They were taken by the people who were supposed to protect them. They found out about something, I don't know what, but it was big enough that Grady risked everything to cover it, and I helped him for a while, until I saw what he was willing to do, what he did to your uncle, to the kids. There's more. You need the other reel. The one he kept locked in the station basement. Only one key ever opened it, and you have it now. Due on the badge ring. I'm sorry, I didn't know how to stop him, but you can. Monsieur Heller Clare sat down, knees weak. Everything was spinning. Rachel paced, whispering to herself. He left the reel in the police station? The old one, Claire said. They decommissioned it in 1998. It's a museum now. We're breaking into a museum? We're retrieving evidence. They waited until 11 p.m. The Eugene Police Museum sat quiet and dark. A single security light glowed above the entrance. Rachel distracted the night guard, an elderly veteran who liked to talk, while Claire slipped inside through the back entrance with the brass key. She made her way to the old records room. The key turned. A metal locker creaked open. Inside, a film reel, labeled Dinner Alt, Do Not Duplicate. She tucked it into her bag. But before leaving, she noticed something on the shelf. A case, sealed. Dated 1972. Inside, photographs, dozens of them. Surveillance, all of Claire, aged 4 to 16. School, home, even one from her college graduation. All stamped, archived, word of state, under observation. Claire backed away. Then she heard the sound. Click. A camera. She turned. No one there. But the security monitor in the corner now showed her, standing alone in the records room. The camera light was blinking. She met Rachel outside. You got it? But Rachel, they've been watching me since I was a child. You were the only witness, even if you didn't know it. I think someone still doesn't want this real scene. Then we watch it. Now. They returned to the house and played the new reel on a digitized projector Rachel brought from her office. The footage began like the others. The family at dinner. Laughter, wine glasses, roast chicken. Then a knock. The children freeze. Her uncle stands, walks to the door, opens it, and then 3 men enter. One is Sheriff Grady. Another is Deputy Heller. The third man, unknown, wears surgical gloves. No one resists. Her uncle says something. It's inaudible. Grady pulls a document from his coat, slides it across the table. Her grandmother signs it, crying. The children are ushered away. The last shot is of her cousin Jamie looking directly into the lens. Mouths something. Frame freezes. Rachel rewinds, zooms, reads his lips. Tell Claire. Claire collapsed into herself. She didn't remember any of this. But someone had tried to leave her a message anyway. What was the document? She asked. Rachel shook her head. Whatever it was, it meant silence. That night someone broke into Rachel's office. Files were stolen, her hard drives wiped. Only Claire's copies remained. The next morning, Mayor Evelyn Grady held a press conference condemning conspiracy theorists exploiting family tragedy for political gain. She mentioned no names, but everyone knew. Claire looked at Rachel. She knows. She's scared. Then we're close. They returned to the Whitmore house. Rachel opened the metal box again and found something they hadn't noticed before. A second map, marked Miller Farm, Well. Claire's breath caught. That's where the city dumped unused materials in the 70s, including bodies. They drove there before dawn. The place was overgrown, abandoned. A dried-up well sat in the field, boarded over. They pried it open. The smell hit them immediately, not of decay, but of chemicals. Inside, they found bones, small ones, wrapped in linen marked with city-issued property tags, and a ring, her aunt's, still on a blackened finger. Claire dropped to her knees. The well wasn't just symbolic, it was real. As they turned to leave, a voice called out, "Claire!" She turned. Rachel wasn't speaking. Another woman stood at the edge of the trees, gray hair, pale skin, trembling. Claire stepped forward. "Who are you?" I'm Lucy." "Lucy who?" "Lucy Whitmore." Claire froze. "My cousin Lucy died." "No, I didn't." "That's impossible." The woman pulled a necklace from her coat, a locket. Inside, a photo of them together, toddlers in matching dresses. Claire dropped it. Lucy's voice cracked. "They kept me quiet. They said if I spoke, they'd kill the others. I ran. I've been hiding ever since." "Why come back now?" "Because I saw you on the news. And because it's not over." Claire stepped closer. "Then tell me everything." Lucy nodded. "But not here." "Someone's watching. They always are." The wind howled across the field as Claire stared at the woman claiming to be Lucy Whitmore, her cousin, dead for 52 years. But Lucy's eyes, they were the same. Claire had seen them in old photographs, wide, green, with a slight drop in the left. Even as a child, Lucy had a stare that lingered a beat too long. Now that same stare bore into her. Claire reached out and touched Lucy's arm. Warm. Real. "Oh, where have you been all this time?" she whispered. Lucy looked past her, scanning the trees. "That depends. Do you want the short version, or the one that'll make you question everything?" Claire's voice cracked. "The truth." They brought her back to the Whitmore house. Rachel made tea while Claire sat across from Lucy, trying to bridge the gap between past and present. Lucy spoke slowly, as if the words had been rusting inside her for decades. "They didn't kill us, not all of us." "Then where did you go?" "They split us up. After that night, we were taken in a van to a safe house, not the government, something else. They called it the program. I don't know what it stood for, just that we weren't supposed to remember anything." "Why?" "Because of what our uncle found. He worked for the city, land management. He uncovered records that didn't match, zoning approvals that had signatures from people who were supposedly dead." Claire frowned. "Fake approvals? Worse?" "They were hiding chemical dumps, under schools, parks, our neighborhood." Rachel stiffened. Jesus. He was going to go public. Grandma begged him to wait, but the night of the dinner, it was too late. "So the sheriff came?" Claire asked. "Not alone. With men from the city, lawyers. They brought documents, threats, and a choice." Claire's voice dropped. "Cooperate or disappear." Lucy nodded. The adults agreed, for the kids' safety. They signed everything, and the city made them vanish. Quietly? Staged it all. They moved some of us away. The others, I never saw again. "You're saying the kids were part of a witness relocation?" Rachel asked. "Not legally. It was off books. Shadow deals, the police, the mayor's office, even corporate people. I was moved through 3 families, different last names. I never used Whitmore again, but I remembered everything. I never forgot the knock." Rachel pulled out her phone. "If what you're saying is true, there's a chance someone still has those records, hidden somewhere." Lucy shook her head. "You're not getting them." "Why?" "Because the man who kept them is dead. He died last year, but not before he left me." She reached into her coat and pulled out a USB stick. Claire's heart pounded. Lucy handed it to her. "He said, if anything ever happened to him, I should find you, that you were the only one who'd still care." They plugged the drive into Rachel's laptop. There were only 2 files. One was a PDF, scanned pages of zoning maps, permits, environmental reports, and chemical inventory records. Dozens of locations marked failed containment. The other file was a video. They opened it. Grainy, dated 2016. A man sat in a chair, wrinkled face, oxygen tube, trembling hands. "If you're watching this, then I'm gone. My name is Daniel Huxley, former Deputy Mayor, Eugene, Oregon." He coughed violently. "We lied. We buried it, the contamination, the dumping, the disappearances." Grady thought he could scare the Whitmores into silence, but Harold wasn't just following orders, He enjoyed it. He didn't just move them, he erased them. Another pause. Clare Whitmore, I knew your uncle. He was brave. He refused to be quiet. I let fear win. I'm sorry. There's a storage unit in Salem. Locker, door to Barrow 2. Inside is everything. Then the screen went black. They drove to Salem the next day. Unit number 402 sat untouched. Clare used one of the brass keys from the basement. Inside, dozens of boxes, files, photographs. One box was labeled Whitmore Final Notice. Inside it, a VHS tape. Clare recognized the label. OCT 12, 1971. Dinner, Final Master. Rachel found an old player at the museum. They watched it in silence. Same dinner, same knock. But this time, after the children are taken, a final scene plays. The adults are led to the basement, hands bound. Grady signs a paper, then walks upstairs and locks the door. A fire is lit. Smoke begins to rise. The camera cuts off. Clare gasped. Rachel covered her mouth. They had been burned alive. Clare collapsed against the wall, screaming. Lucy sat beside her, numb. I thought they just disappeared. They didn't, Lucy. They were silenced. They let you live? Because I was too small to talk, and later I was too scared. Rachel called a journalist she trusted. She released the files, the footage, the map, everything. The story broke in national news 2 days later. Eugene exploded in outrage. A memorial was erected at the site of the old Whitmore home, now officially declared a crime scene. Mayor Evelyn Grady held a press conference, but this time she didn't deny it. She cried. I was a child. My father, I didn't know. I swear. Clare didn't believe her, but someone else did. That night, someone left an envelope on Clare's porch. Inside, one final reel. No label, no date. Just a sticky note. You missed something. The footage showed a baby in a hospital crib, labeled Whitmore, female, 10/13/71. Clare leaned forward. It was her. A nurse leaned into frame. She looked directly at the camera and whispered, She's the insurance. If they talk, she dies. Clare dropped the reel. Everything blurred. She hadn't just survived by chance. She'd been a hostage her whole life. The reel lay shattered on the floor. Clare sat alone, knees pulled to her chest, rocking gently. The truth echoed inside her like a scream that had no throat left to escape. She wasn't a survivor. She was a hostage. From the moment she could crawl, her life had been used as leverage to keep a secret buried beneath a dinner table that never saw dessert. Lucy stayed by her side, silent, still. Rachel tried to comfort her, but Clare didn't speak for hours. Just watched the light flicker against the wall. Just listened to the same ticking sound from the camera in the hallway, still blinking like it always did, even with no film inside. By morning, Clare finally said something. They killed them to keep me alive. Rachel nodded, tears streaming down her face. But they didn't win. You're still here, and you told their story. It wasn't my story to tell. You were the only one left who could. Clare stood up slowly, carefully. She walked to the basement one final time. The air still carried the weight of everything that happened. She sat where the furnace used to be, now removed by investigators, and she whispered, I'm sorry, for not remembering, for not knowing, for being the reason you suffered. Her voice cracked. But I will not forget again. The town of Eugene changed. The Grady name was stripped from public buildings. The police department issued a public apology. The city council voted to build a permanent memorial garden where the house once stood. Clare designed it herself. At the center, a bronze table with 8 empty chairs and a plaque that read, They were never missing. They were silenced. We will not be silent again. Lucy chose to stay. She found a job teaching art therapy to trauma survivors at a local shelter. Rachel's story won awards, but she refused interviews. Claire moved into a small apartment near the memorial site. Nothing fancy, just quiet. She taught history at the university, local history especially. She never changed her last name. She wanted people to ask, so she could tell them. One rainy Thursday, she received a letter, no return address. Inside, a photograph. Her grandmother, holding a newborn, Clare. On the back, scribbled in familiar handwriting, "She's our light. Don't let them take it from her." It wasn't signed, but she knew it came from someone who had loved her once and lost everything. She framed the photo. Months passed. Autumn again. On the day of the memorial dedication, Claire stood before the crowd. Dozens of people, strangers and family, news cameras, survivors of other buried truths. She read the names aloud, all of them, one by one, each one a vow. That night after the ceremony, Claire sat alone on a bench beside the bronze table. The wind rustled the trees gently. She closed her eyes, and for the first time since she was 2 years old, she felt peace, not because the pain was gone, but because it finally had a name. The leaves fell quietly across the stone path of the memorial garden. It had been 1 year since the story broke, since the tapes were shown, since the Whitmores became more than a whispered name. Now visitors came from all over, to sit at the bronze table, to touch the backs of the empty chairs, to cry for people they'd never met, because truth has a way of making strangers into family. Claire came every Thursday morning before the grounds opened. She brought a single peach, all was whole, never cut. She placed it at the center of the table. A dessert finally served. Life moved on, slowly, quietly. The world didn't change overnight. There were still people who called it conspiracy, still people who said she made it up for attention, still people who refused to believe the badge could lie. But for every one of them, there were 10 more who said, "I remember my grandfather worked near that site. My mother had friends on that street. I lost someone too." The garden became a place of whispers and healing. Claire kept the last reel locked in a fireproof safe, the one that showed her as a baby. She never watched it again. She didn't need to, because in her mind she'd rewritten the ending. Not a crib with a camera, but a pair of arms, holding her close, promising that she was loved. Lucy spoke publicly for the first time that spring. Her voice shook, but her words stood strong. We didn't get justice. Not the kind you read about in courtrooms, but we got something better. We got to tell the truth. Rachel retired from reporting. She published one book, just one. It ended not with a conclusion, but with a question. How many other stories are we still too afraid to tell? On the anniversary of the disappearance, Claire received a package wrapped in brown paper, no return address. Inside, a camera, old, heavy, dusty, but carefully preserved, the same model her uncle had used. Taped to the side, a handwritten note, "Finish what I started." Claire smiled through tears. She placed it on her bookshelf beside the notebook, the locket, and the photo of the baby in her grandmother's arms. That night, she returned to the garden alone, sat at the table, listened to the wind, watched the shadows move across the chairs. And then she spoke. "I know now. I wasn't left behind. I was carried forward." She looked up at the stars. "And I won't let go of any of you again." She stood, placed her hand on the bronze table, and whispered, "I'm home." As she walked away, the camera inside her bag clicked once. Even without film, it remembered what it was made for: to preserve, to testify, to wait, and maybe one day to speak again.